I'm going to call the Kentucky Board of Ed United We Learn Teaching and Learning Committee to order. We'll start with a roll call.
Holly Bloodworth.
Here.
Lee Todd.
Here.
Julie Pyle. Oh, I think she just stepped out.
Oh.
Alyssa Riley.
Here.
Patrice McCrary.
Here.
Joanne Adams.
Here.
Dr. Thompson is not. But I will make note when Ms. Pyle returns.
Okay. All right. So first of all, we're excited to hear a report from David Cook and Sarah Snipes.
Sarah Snipes is on the call
Okay.
virtually. She's kind of at her medical appointment that she had earlier is a little over, so she's not able to speak right now. But
Okay.
I'm a fill-in.
she's a fill-in, and I think I can channel her pretty well. So.
All right. Well, we're excited to hear the update on the local laboratories of learning and Portrait of a Learner.
Great. Thank you, Chair Bloodworth. We're excited today to talk to you about two things which are highly connected, and that is the local laboratories of learning, which is a key initiative under the United We Learn vision. As you know, we have 18 school districts, communities that are in this process, the local laboratory of learning process, or L3s. And the thing that's most important to know about them as it pertains to this conversation is they were the lead off on the whole portrait conversation. The work that they're all doing somehow ties back to that, whether or not they call it that. That's what they're working on. And they're working on it in a very specific way. And that is, and you'll hear from me after we do this presentation, I'll talk to you about the CGSA grant. They're doing it in an effort to think about local accountability as a part of the larger accountability conversation, which is why portrait is so important to that conversation, because the portrait really is the place where local accountability can really come to life, because it is different in every district. It's a little bit tweaked here and a little bit tweaked there. So it makes the most sense that that's where we have those local accountability conversations. What is it we want for our kids in our district that goes beyond the current accountability system? So next slide, please. So I want to talk to you a little bit about where we are with Portrait of a Learner, and we're really, really excited about this. And these are even old numbers. Sarah didn't want to try to change the slide for you today, so it's even a little higher than this. But we now have 90 plus districts who have either begun the process of designing and implementing a Portrait of a Learner or have one. As you can see, we have 59 districts that actually have one, and we have another 30 plus now that are developing a set of competencies using the state board approved competencies to design a local Portrait of a Learner. That's pretty exciting from my perspective. I wasn't sure how quickly we would get there, but I think one of the things that people are really valuing, we hear this almost every time we talk to a new district, is we love the fact that we have some ability to make it our own. That even though the state board approved a Portrait of a Learner, that they can do something to that makes it theirs. And so they always love it when we don't tell them what to do, right? So that's the exciting thing about that. So as you can see, we have a lot of districts, we don't know their status. We've tried to do surveying. We've tried to do things like that, but sometimes you just can't find out that stuff. Folks won't talk to you about it, I guess. We do know that there are a few districts who are pretty much right now, at least on the no side, but that's a small number, as you can see, 5 districts that are not considering developing one. and maybe we can find some ways to turn their heads, if you will. Yes, Julie.
Have they given any kind of reason why? Like they're saying, nope, they're not even gonna go down?
Well, I think at the end of the day, Julia, I think it all comes back to, if you all remember, those of you that have been on the board a while, we presented a while back a graphic. And at the center of that graphic, we referred to the term a prepared graduate. And there are just a few districts who think a prepared graduate is somebody who has gotten 22 credits, has an ACT score, has a GPA, has taken all the courses they're supposed to take. And they think that's enough. I would disagree, but they have that ability to do that. So that's
And
kind of where we are with that.
speaking to the graphic that you showed earlier, I'm thinking back to that, and I'm wondering about these, the unknown status of the 62
Mhm.
districts. Are they scattered across the Commonwealth, or are they in those clusters like we saw on the graphic?
I think they are scattered, Patrice. I think they are, there's various reasons why, and I think you probably know this, but there's a lot of districts that sit and wait, and they want to see what happens with this, and then they'll be joining us. But again, we're past 50% now, and that's pretty good for the amount. When you think about when you all adopted it and where we are, that's a pretty good place to be, I think.
And I think two districts, we're finally getting some momentum back. They have been through a lot through the years of COVID and opening their doors back and finding teachers to teach their classes and even transitioning students maybe from homeschool settings back to public school. So I think as the momentum continues to move forward, maybe some of those 62 unknown status, they just haven't gotten there yet, just depending on district size, district capacity, turnover in administration, teacher shortages, turnover on new board members. So I do think there's definitely a momentum going out there, and I wouldn't be shocked if we came back in a year from now and possibly even cut that 62 in half.
Yeah, I think the state approving one gives a lot of districts the launch point to
Mhm.
start the conversation. I know in Boone County, we didn't have anything to start off with. So we looked at some other states and some other districts and kind of reinvented the wheel.
Mhm.
So I can see where with the state board, okay, we've got something we like, we just need to tweak it for
Yeah.
us. I think that really helps.
Next slide, please. So one of the things that Sarah went through and did, this is specifically to the L3s. So when we think about the L3s, most of them are a little bit further along in this process than most districts are. And these are just some trends that we're seeing in particularly the L3 districts. They're not only developing a portrait, they're already thinking about how that fits into their curriculum. How are they going to, in essence, integrate it into their curriculum? So when you have a really good situation in a district with a portrait of a learner, it's not something added to people's plates. It is the pure integration of, well, while we're teaching math and while we're teaching English and while we're teaching science and social studies, we're going to be watching how these students are doing as collaborators and creative contributors and as engaged citizens. And so you begin to integrate it that way so that it's not like, okay, we're going to go over here and test these kids or assess them on these competencies. They've just become part of the rest of the curriculum. So as you all know, and this is part of United We Learn and part of the L3 movement from the beginning, this is about not just adopting one and the district adopting a portrait of a learner, but it's a community adopting a portrait of a learner. And it's a community engaged in every step of that process so that when students start to become competent in those competencies, the community knows, and you're going to start seeing community members asking students, hey, how's it going with with this competency and that competency. So they're much more engaged at the L3 level just because of the way we designed L3s for that. And they're beginning to really think about, as you know, we've shared with you all these performance outcomes that we designed for the competencies in the state portrait. So what does it look like for a second grader to be a collaborator? And what does it look like for an eighth grader to be an engaged citizen? Just at different levels of the system. And they're really starting to, at the local level, think about, well, how am I going to know that? And it's going to be a whole lot of different things, I can tell you. It's not, oh, well, we're going to design this assessment and all the kids are going to take it, because they're not going to get there at the same times. And so it's going to be a lot more observational on teachers' parts to say, I'm seeing Patrice being this, I'm seeing, so it's going to be a new way of thinking about how we know that a student is there in that regard. Next slide.
I kind of like what you just said, because to me, that professionalizes teaching more too. It gives more credence
Right.
to what the teacher
Exactly.
is observing and seeing.
Exactly. So we did a survey and asked about where we got the information, some of the information that we've garnered about where districts were in their portrait journey. The biggest number one thing people said, we need guidance. We need to know what to do to go through this process. How do we do it? So we developed a document that is just that. It's how do you do this? How do you start? How do you go from step to step to step? And this and other resources, I'll show you in just a second, the website, but we have a website where folks can access this information. But this really helps. It's a really comprehensive document about how do you do this? How do you get a portrait of a learner? Next slide. And we have these are additional things that are on that you see at the top of the page. If you just go to, I think everybody knows that on the main front page of KDE's website, one of the links is to innovation, to our division's work. If you click on that, you can get right to a page about Portrait of a Learner, if you're looking for it that way. But this shows you, we have a Portrait of a Learner frequently asked questions that has been very helpful to folks who have misconceptions probably about, there are those districts that had misconception that when you all adopted a statewide portrait that they were going to have to just pull it out, stick it in there, like I just said a minute ago, that you are basically saying this is how you're going to do a portrait of a learner. And that's a question that comes up often, and that we have to explain to them, no, that's not the way this works. And then we have a list of the districts who have portraits or are planning to have portraits. And I think that's all the slides that we have. Do you all have any other questions or any comments or anything that we maybe haven't touched on that you're interested in talking about?
I have to say this is great work in Christian County where we've started a lot, and I teach high school, but I know at the elementary levels, they're focusing on a competency a week. And when teachers see a student that's a collaborator, they give them a little ticket and tell them, so they're making things their own. And, instead of profile of a learner or graduate, they call it profile of an owl. They take their school mascot. And so they're really making it. And I think that's good because there's buy-in and they want to be a part of that. So it's exciting. It's really neat to see.
And Alyssa, just to add to that, I think that's another thing that we're seeing almost across the board. When we talk or when we help, and by the way, we have a lot of partners. There are a lot of both in-state partners, UK Next Gen, and others who are supporting districts in building this process. But when we see them really engaging in this work, you all were very intentional to make this a portrait of a learner, not a portrait of a graduate. And one of the most exciting things to us about it is things like you just said, Alyssa. When they do it right, they're designing something that is for all K-12 students. When you do a portrait of a graduate, you can tend to cut the thing down to 9 through 12.
Yep.
And that's hard to just start out in 9th grade trying to think about competencies. If you haven't done a first grader, a second grader, a kindergartner going, hey, look, I'm a collaborator. I'm a, critical thinker. Then and that's how important this thing is. I think it's got so much to offer if a district sees that. And when you talk to them and they do see that, that's really powerful in their process, is to say, we want this for all our kids. We want to see a kid, what it looks like when they're in first grade to be a collaborator, then see what it looks like when they graduate to be a collaborator, and how that growth happens across the system. So
I think the other thing that's helpful is we're finally starting to get some common language across the state versus just pockets and different things. Like, it might be tweaked a little bit, but underlying it, we're all talking the same thing. But
yeah. Anything else?
Are you finding any common sticking points for districts, like things that, I don't know, that they're struggling with?
I think that if they struggle, it is that last step, which is, how are we going to figure out what it looks like to be? Now, we have given them some examples. We've given them some performance outcomes and indicators, which give them some looks at what it should look like in a 5th grade classroom,
Right,
for a kid. But I still think they struggle because there's a tendency to want to get pretty traditional and go, okay, let's sit down and make out a little assessment that we'll do to measure that. And probably most of this isn't going to work that way. It's going to require, to your point about professionalism, Holly, it's going to require teachers spending a little bit more time in observation of their students and recording stuff that they see happening. Because they're going to be able to look in a classroom and watch 4 kids working on a project together and go, those kids are collaborating. I don't have a test to give them to tell me that. I can see it.
They need to talk to primary teachers
Yeah.
who taught during early care, because we were
Yeah.
kings and queens of anecdotal
There you go.
We have strategies.
I think some of the positive, on the flip side of that, I think a positive theme that we see across the state is what they've really bought into is that they can make it their own.
Mhm.
That, each district is different, each community has different needs, and they really appreciate that ability. Sure, they've taken the framework or even had one before the framework came about, but having that ownership of making it what their community and their learners need is a positive that we've seen.
Yeah, definitely.
and tying that into the United We Learn and the Cool Council, that
Yeah.
ties into the vibrant learning communities.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
it's just all
That's right.
it's all pieces of a puzzle that's fitting together.
Mhm.
And I'll say too, if any districts need support, I know in Christian County, we've used our regional educational co-op.
Yes.
It's been a huge asset to us.
Mhm.
And so we've done some professional development through them. So if there are districts that are trying to figure out a way, maybe putting them into contact, because
Absolutely.
they've been helpful for us, I know.
That's a great suggestion. Thanks, Alyssa.
So David, Chair Robinson wanted you to speak briefly on how districts are using the engaged citizen or their equivalent kind of to help promote civics instruction. If you can kind of speak to any examples around kind of civics empowerment.
Yeah, I think that's just it actually becomes a little bit easier on that one if you think about it, because they have some focus on civics anyway, because they have a test. But I think it's a great opportunity when you look at some of the performance outcomes for engaged citizen, for them, back to what the L3s are doing, to incorporate it into the curriculum. It's a way for them to design projects, to do things in class where they get to show their ability to be engaged in being a citizen of their community and what that means, whether that's a project in the community or learning more about it's coming up on election day. What does that all mean? And those just being, I think it's more being intentional about, and I think that can happen with any of these competencies. I think those competencies have a lot to add to the core curriculum, the core content that the kids are having. So.
Any other questions, comments? Well, Kelly, you were a grand stand-in.
Thank you. I try my best. Sarah, hope I did okay.
All right. So the competitive grants for state assessment.
So as most of you all know, we applied for and received exactly a year ago a competitive grant for state assessment, which is a grant program that the U.S. Department of Education has on an ongoing basis. They just have a kind of like what you just did with a strategic priority. They have just a different priority each time they present the grant. And this time it was around innovative assessment and accountability mindsets for states connected to competency-based education, personalized learning, deeper learning, those kinds of things. So we applied for the grant and we received it. It's a 4-year grant worth $3 million. Our grant was almost exclusively contractual dollars to provide to partners such as the Center for Assessment, Knowledge Works, the Center for Innovation and Education, Gene Wilhoit's group, to support a new way of thinking about all of this that we call the Kentucky United We Learn Council. And then there are subsequent measurements and timelines and milestones that sort of support that. So the grant in the first year almost exclusively was sort of the cropping up of that cool council, that Kentucky United We Learn Council, which, as you probably know, is a group of about 60 to 65 stakeholders from all walks of life in Kentucky who meet twice a year in person and then several times beyond that virtually in committees to think about the 3 big ideas of United We Learn and how we can better support the expansion of those ideas and also a place where people can come to share their ideas. So the United We Learn Council was formed. So again, year one, almost exclusively, that's what we were about. As we enter the second year, and as everybody I think knows, the federal government doesn't like to play on a traditional fiscal year calendar. They play on their own little October 1 to September 30th calendar. So October 1st, we hit second year. We're getting ready to have our annual meeting with them to go over what we've done and where we're going. But those funds are supporting those 3 big ideas of the United We Learn vision. So we have a committee that's focused in on vibrant learning experiences, and they're interacting with districts, and they're working to look and see how we can make those more prevalent and understanding all of the different ways that school districts are creating more vibrant learning experiences. We have another committee that's working on innovation as it relates to assessment and accountability. Very recently, the feds have let it be known that for the first time probably ever, they actually do have an interest in listening to innovative accountability ideas. They always have said that before, but we actually talked to like an assistant secretary who said, no, we want to hear what you want to do. So we've got all of these L3s and all of this work of the Cool Council that is coming together around what would a different kind of accountability system look like? Not just throwing everything out and starting something new, but what if we did this and what if we did that? And there's a whole lot of great ideas. And then we have the folks who are going to sit back the third committee who's going to sit back and go, okay, if you want to do that, we're going to have to change this policy. So we have this committee that's really focused on, all right, we're going to have to make plans for Brian and those folks to go over to the legislature and talk about if we really want to do this thing to improve and expand vibrant learning experiences, we're going to need to change this law, or we're going to need to change this set of regs. And what does that look like? So they're collecting all of that data and looking across the whole thing to see where it goes. And all of that is that third piece, or that third big idea, sort of fits a little bit in all of it, but it's that idea that we're doing these things, but more vibrant learning experiences and innovation and assessment accountability with the whole community, not just to the community or we're doing it with the community. So we're in really good shape. We've met whatever we were supposed to meet for year one, and we start on year two with just a deeper dive into those committees and their work. Years 3 and 4, we get into a little, and as you folks probably also know, it's a 4-year federal grant. We're probably going to modify it quite a bit as we get out into 3 and 4, because that just a lot of things can happen in 4 years. And so we may need to make some amendments to one of the things we put into the grant and they really liked was the idea that once we get all this data from these committees and these school districts and the L3s and all of the Portrait of a Learner districts is, well, we may need to look at the way the Department of Education is structured as it supports those things. So if those priorities change at school districts, what does that mean for us? So we have a section, a deliverable of the grant that's about modifying the structure of the Department of Education. So as an example of something that is a little bit unique in these kinds of grants. So those are things, and as with any grant, we have a evaluation partner that's every quarter has provided us with a report on how we're doing, and they're it's HUMRO, which we use a lot for assessment accountability work, but they're helping us see those, and they're getting ready to deliver to us their first year report as well. So that's kind of that. I always think about it as it's the money behind all the work that we're doing. So it's not the work itself, but it's the way we're funding the work. So.
Question. So how many other states received this grant?
There were 10 grants awarded, but the interesting thing, Patrice, is I think one state actually got 2 shares because they in essence wrote 2 grants, but they tied them together. It was really, yeah, I had the same reaction, but there were 10 grants awarded. I think I'm right about that, but.
And are any of the other states going in the direction we're going? Nothing similar at all.
Very
Curious. I wanted to see how cutting edge we are.
We are on the edge because a lot of what the other states are doing, they have taken a section or a population of students and they're working on an innovative assessment and accountability system for a particular, we're looking at more of a system approach. So there's some really, I've listened to some of the ideas and they're great ideas, but I think we were a little bit more yeah, we went big.
Big.
We do. You know us.
Go big. Go big or go home.
So, David, is the bulk of the money for all 4 years kind of to pay for the support groups and
Yeah, and so
partners?
all those partners that I mentioned are supporting the Cool Council. So they meet individually with members. They're heading up some of those committees. They're staffing those committees. They have expertise in a lot of, Knowledge Works is our policy partner. The Center for Assessment. The Center for Assessment obviously is our accountability partner. So they're really looking at the technical aspects of it, of what, if we come up with a great big idea, they're going to go, I don't know if that's going to work. Or those kind of things. The Center for Innovation and Education is actually been our facilitation partner. So they sort of led all of the work in terms of facilitating those meetings. We have some connection partners. We have a secondary assessment partner. We have a secondary, we have co-op involvement in this work as well. And it ties very nicely into the Big Deeper Learning grant that we did with our co-ops last year, and with our PBL Works grant that we did. All of that sort of meshes into this conversation. So it's all, again, we're all, as you said, I think, Patrice, we're moving, it's all sort of lining up. No, it was you, Julia, you said that, yeah.
So when you say it's 3 million for the 4 years, is it kind of evenly distributed? Or
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's almost, because the work increases. So the first year was mostly just the creation and sort of standing up of the council. The funding was less in year one. So it's not an even, like, you can't just take 3 million and divide in fourths. It's a little bit less in year one. It increases each year as we go.
will more groups be brought in?
No, it's just each of those groups has a set of deliverables themselves, and they just change from year to year, or they
Will
may.
more schools be brought in, like, or will it stay?
Well,
the-
I think that's something that we are really trying to decide whether we want to continue to be formalized in that. But with the portrait being the new big thing, we're basically going to get everybody involved as they develop the portrait. That's sort of how this links together. We originally had the 18 local labs, and we thought about, okay, we're going to do a 4th cohort and a 5th cohort and a 6th cohort. Well, now what we're doing is we have begun to rethink the modules of training that we did for those local labs in a more generic way, so that any district can access those modules and be trained on how to create this reciprocal co-created process that the L3s created at any time they want to. So I think, again, just the last thing I'll say, I think that the portrait has been a really great enabler of districts engaging more in this process of the work of United We Learn, of the United We Learn Council, and of this grant. So.
Any other questions, comments?
It's exciting to see it go from this absolute dream into actually taking shape.
Dr. Todd.
Yeah. Would it be possible for us to see the actual grant that was submitted?
Absolutely.
I get confused over who all's doing what and what all's, you got 3 groups that are, I guess, on subcontract, and you got something that we've done previously is kind of integrated in. I'd just like to see the grant. It's
Sure.
fundamental.
It's only a couple of 100 pages, so we'll look to.
Yeah, just electronically would be fine.
Yeah, absolutely. No worries.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you so much,
Mhm.
David.
Thank you, David.
All right, next we will hear a Kentucky United We Learn Council update from Chief Performance Officer Karen Dodd.
Well,
Yeah.
David has the boring job of money and dealing with the Department of US Ed. I have the fun job of working with all of the members of the Cool Council. So I'm going to give you an update today. Over the summer, we sent out a survey to see how we're doing as a council. So I'm going to share those results with you now. First of all, we did ask that the members, you can go to the next slide, Meredith. We asked that the members consider re-upping for another year. So as they joined, we said it's a 1-year commitment, and then with the option to renew each year. We had about 74 members, and I say about because we had 75 members to start with. There are some that never showed up, and there are some that showed up maybe once or twice. So when we sent this out, we had 50 of those 70-some members who have renewed for another year. which means and then we had some, like I said, just kind of drop throughout the year or resign throughout the year for one reason or another. So we had about 21 resignations, and I'm calling it a resignation even if they didn't respond. So if we didn't hear from them or they never showed up, we're now removing them from the council. So about 21 resignations. We then sent out some new invites. We looked back at the applications from the prior year to see if we could invite some, because there was a good, I'd say close to 200 that applied that we were not able to accept on, or we would have had a huge, 70 some is already a huge council. So there were quite a few that we had to say not now to. So we reached out to some of them and invited them in for this year. We also received a couple names from a board member. And then our leadership team for the Cool Council also recommended just some other people to fill in some of those spots that were missing because of those resignations. So of the 10 invites that went out, 5 accepted. So we are now at 55 members for the council. On the next slide is a map, and you can see where all of those members have representation throughout the Commonwealth. So everywhere that you see a pin is where we have one or multiple members from those areas. So still not great for far west, definitely more central Kentucky. I think just logistically, we just tend to get more people from Louisville, Fayette, Frankfort. So you do see kind of more of a cluster there, but we tried really hard to make sure that we had representation as far and wide as possible. Then looking at the demographics by race, we have about almost 75% white, 16.5% Black or African American, 3.6% that chose not to answer, 3.6 Hispanic or Latino, and 1.8% Asian. So it's actually a little bit more diverse than Kentucky itself, and we really wanted to be radically diverse. So we were pretty happy with those numbers. Then we asked each person to identify themselves into a stakeholder group. So we have about 38% who represent educators. So that's our highest our highest stakeholder group. Then we have family, which was at 23.6%. Family could be parents, could be grandparents, however they identified themselves. Also 23.6% fall into community or business, and those could be business leaders, business owners, it could be legislators, it could be an education advocacy group. And finally, 14.5% are students. And of those students, we have a lot who are actually taking lead roles within the council, either chairs or vice chairs. So they're very involved. I will say we have found that as they graduate from K-12, they're finding it harder to engage. So we are seeing that. We've got a couple that we're kind of losing and may need to shift their role a little bit just because of their other obligations as they move on. And finally, we have demographics by gender. So almost 70% are female and 30% male. Then we move into the actual questions from the survey. We had 3 domains in the survey, starting with the direction, vision, and goals. I'm not going to go through every single one of these with you, but I'll kind of give you the highs and lows, all of which were surprisingly really high. We did this on a 4-point scale, 1 being I strongly disagree with that statement, 2 is I disagree, 4. 1 is I strongly disagree, 2 is just, I am not getting this right. 3 is disagree, 2 agree, 1, I did it backwards, didn't I? You all know what I mean. Okay, so for direction, vision, and goals, I have the skills, experience, expertise to contribute to the work of the council. 98% rated that either as agree or strongly agree. So the average score was a 3.73. So anything between a 3 And a 4 is really what we're looking for here. Really 3.5 or better is what would be a very strong score. So at the bottom end of this one, the mandate or direction of the council is clear, appropriate, and relevant. 86% agree or strongly agree with a score of 3.25. So we did identify this, even though 86 sounds, it is strong, but it is one of the lower numbers that we see. So going into this convening next month, we know this is an area that we really need to focus on. And when I get to the agenda, you'll see how we're doing that.
Karen,
And-
can I make a comment? on
Yes,
that?
please.
Anytime you start into a project and this big work, the first part of it is messy.
Oh,
And
yeah.
If you're a person who likes structure and things and can't see big picture, it's really difficult for you. And that
Meredith, it's not been messy at all. Trying to breathe.
It's been a little messy.
So, I mean, that number being lowered isn't surprising to me, knowing that that's how the big work, the hard work begins, is the first year is messy and there's not a lot of structure to it.
That storming, norming,
Yeah.
forming, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
we're a lot of storming going on. All right, our second domain is communication. A lot of questions in this area. At the top, I seek to understand others' viewpoints, and this is a really what we strive to do as a full council. So you see 100% agreed or strongly agreed with that with 3.83. So very strong there. And at the bottom end, the frequency and scheduling of meetings are sufficient to carry out the work. That average score was a 3.2 with 81% agreeing or strongly agreeing. So this is another area that we know we have to work out. David talked about the 3 councils. We're even going to see if we need to bust up those councils or start having some work groups that can meet at different times, some smaller groups, something that'll work a little bit better for more people. So we're going to be talking about that in the convening as well.
How often do you all meet?
The council, so the full council meets twice a year. We meet in the
Okay.
spring and in the fall. So this will be our 3rd meeting. So last November it was kicked off. Second convening was in April, and this will be our 3rd one this November.
And then the little individual committees meet
The
throughout?
committees meet once a month,
Okay.
each of them. Mhm.
And I will add that, oh my gosh, that was loud. I apologize. Several of the committees actually elected to create subcommittees or work groups to sort of have targeted work, which I think speaks to Karen's suggestion that it might be more efficient and productive to have topical work groups rather than kind of this current committee structure that has that once a month meeting.
Okay.
We'll see how that pans out. Then we had a couple open-ended questions in the survey. So some positive themes that came out of this. First, opportunities to network. People, you should have a slide on this one, Meredith, I think. Yeah. Opportunities to network. They really like that. Members enjoy working across the stakeholder groups, and there is a sense of inclusion. So another thing that we were really stressing is that whole inclusion. Excitement over the direction of the work, and well-organized, well-staffed, and productive meetings were all comments made. Some things that we heard that we need to improve upon, of course, better communication. You can't have a survey without having to improve on communication. Vision and goals are not always clear. So even though with the specific questions that we asked or the statements that we had in there, everybody scored really high. When it came to the comments, they did say they're not really clear on what we're exactly what it is that we're trying to do. So we're going to be working on that next month as well. We need better member participation. That came from all of the committees. Cadence of meeting may need to be addressed both for members and leaders. Those of us who are leaders of this team, we have we have facilitators, we have leaders, we have partners, we have chairs. It's a lot of meetings. So even those who are doing the planning, Meredith's nodding, we need to get our cadence down better. So we're going to be working on that as well. So let's move on. Any questions about the survey before I move on?
Did everybody respond?
No. As I said, the ones who didn't respond were the ones who really haven't engaged much. So when we didn't get a response from them, we've taken them off. So that's part of the 21 that
Okay.
we didn't hear from. So for the convening, November 2nd and 3rd, so it's a Thursday, Friday, and the agenda has changed a bit from what I've already submitted to Meredith. But basically, this first day hasn't really changed a whole lot. We will be letting people know, having Robin there to greet them and to talk about stability in the time of transition. So even though we have a new chair, a new vice chair, a new interim commissioner, we want them to know that this work is going to go on. So we will have all three of them there.
All is good.
All three of them to assure everybody that, because that is a fear. I mean, from the very beginning, that has been a fear of the folks on this council. Like, okay, this is 4 years. Is this really going to take? Are we really going to make a difference? And so we want to keep assuring them that all systems are a go. We will, I'm on the wrong page. We will also finalize the moonshot. So this is where that vision comes in. What is our vision? What is our direction? Then Chair Young, so when we kicked this off last year, Chair Young really talked about a man walking on the moon, right? And that we want a real moonshot. So what is it that we want to change in education? Think beyond the stars, think to the moon. But we never really said, this is what it is. So we need to define that moonshot. We need an actual vision statement, just as you all were working on today. We need that for the council. And so that's going to be job number 1 in November, is to really finalize that moonshot or that vision. Then we're going to do some journey mapping. Has anybody ever done journey mapping? Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Okay. So journey mapping is kind of fun. You look at the work, and we're going to be looking at it for the past year. So you develop your timeline. What are the events that really stand out over the past year? Any decisions that really stand out that were made over the past year? And then above the timeline, you have, it may just be like a smiley face up here and a frowny face down here. How did you feel during those events or as those decisions were being made? And so every member kind of maps out their feelings about how things have played out over the year. And then you take a look at that and say, okay, so what are the real pain points that we're dealing with? And so then what we'll do is collect all of that. Each of the committees is going to work on this separately. The leadership team is going to model it. So we're going to be talking about what's been painful for us. And then we'll send the members off to their committees, and they can go through the journey mapping themselves. And then we'll have them all come back together and really identify what are those pain points. And on day 2, we'll be trying to focus on how do we resolve those pain points and move forward. Part of it will be identifying the deliverables that have been created or still need to be created. So out of all of that, we'll be able to come back together on day 2, and then they'll be breaking out. They're going to spend the morning in committees or work groups and trying to resolve some of the issues that came up through that journey mapping. We are inviting more people in for lunch and for a panel discussion in the afternoon. This is where you all come in. We still have 2 open positions for board members to come and join us on the panel. We would like you to come for lunch, and right after lunch, we will have a celebration for completing 1 year of the council. And then you will hear everything that we've done over the day and a half, and how we're going to resolve some of these issues that have come up through this journey mapping. And then they're going to be looking for feedback. So we're inviting board members. We're inviting, I think Senator Tipton will be there. A couple other folks from LRC that are being invited. We've invited the regional co-op directors. I think that might be it. There might be a couple other people that we still invite. We haven't gotten a whole lot of folks responding yet. As I said, we know that Robin will be there, the chair, vice chair, and I think, Julie, I know you said you can only attend 1 day. Is that?
I was just looking at my schedule. I can come both days. I'll move
Perfect.
some.
Okay, so Julie will be there. So that leaves 2 openings for more board members. So if anybody is interested, we would really love to have you there. And like I said, they're really looking for your feedback. Is what they are working on, is the moonshot that they define. Does it sound aspirational enough? Does it sound doable? they're really going to be looking for those kinds of comments. So as they share out, they'll look for some feedback, then they'll have some table talk where they'll kind of divide up and talk about how, okay, what did we hear? How are we going to resolve it? So those kinds of things. So that's what we'll spend the afternoon doing before we call it quits for the convening
Where is this taking place?
here in training room downstairs.
So I have a comment to make. So in one of the meetings I had, I was going back and forth with one of our students, which the students have been fabulous through this whole process, the input and insight they give. But it was interesting, his perspective versus mine. He felt like he would rather have small wins and changes of our education system than go for a big moonshot. And so we had this discussion back and forth. I'm like, why are we going through this process if we're not going for the gusto? And he's like, because that's not reality. So I just thought it'd be interesting to share that perspective.
Yeah. That'll be interesting. I think that will be really interesting when we have this conversation, because like I said, it's been a year into this and we haven't defined it. And I do wonder how many people are thinking, because it's a moonshot is not about incremental work. And that was not what Lou charged us with. She charged us with a moonshot, really changing how we do education. And so it's going to be really interesting to see what they come up with. And we have asked superintendents, we've asked students and some other advisory groups, what would their moonshot be? So we have some of that to bring into this discussion as well, just to give them some ideas of what others have brought forward. All right.
It sounds really exciting.
It is
I'm
exciting.
gonna look at my calendar.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Let us know. You can let Meredith know or let me know either way. But yeah, 2 members, first come, first serve, but we'd love to have at least 2 more.
Are there any other questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, so now we need a motion and a second to adjourn this committee meeting.
I move, we adjourn.
Thank you, Patrice. Thank you, Julie. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.